to the Connect the Dots podcast. Jeffrey Klein has conversations with a diverse array of successful people, sharing their stories to educate, inspire, and entertain. Here is your host, Jeffrey.
My guest today is Chris Perry, an award-winning writer and director with 25 years of animation experience. He began his career at Rhythm Hues and Pixar before helping create 4 award-winning independent short films, including The Incident at Tower 37 and CALDERA. Perry's work has earned him a Sci-Tech Oscar and a MegaGrant from Epic Games. Chris is a tenured professor at Hampshire College and has a screenwriting textbook out with Bloomsbury Press in 2022. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Nice to be here.
I like to start at the beginning. So where were you born and what did your parents do for a living?
I was born in Northern California, officially in a town called Greenbrae. And my parents, they've had their own exciting careers. But at the time, when I think about when I was young, my dad was an accountant who would put on a suit every day and drive into San Francisco. And my mom bounced around for a number of smaller sales jobs and ultimately found a lot of fulfillment in doing outplacement work. So helping people find work that had been recently laid off or who were getting laid off. That's what they were doing when I consider myself young.
Well, when you were young then, with those kind of examples, what did people said to you, your 8 or 9-year-old self, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you have said?
Oh, astronaut, instantly and always. That was a consistent for many, many years.
As I think is true of a lot of us.
Yeah, probably.
And other than your parents, was there anyone you looked up to as a role model when you were growing up? Buzz Aldrin, maybe, or
Yeah. It's interesting. I think I was pretty insulated and wasn't looking far beyond, being a student. And I grew up with 2 stepbrothers, and I have 2 stepbrothers because when my parents got divorced, they both got remarried. And they're both older than me, like 2 and 3 years older. And honestly, they probably don't even realize this, but they were very big role models to me in terms of their approach to school. And at the time, when you're a kid, that's kind of like your work is your school. And they both were very serious students. And I kind of absorbed osmotically their approach to their studies and prioritizing school. And I didn't, it wasn't until I was a little older, I think, that I had sort of role models that were maybe more visible than that. But yeah, both my stepbrothers were big role models for me.
Well, I have to ask my brother. I have a younger stepbrother who's only 9 months younger. Oh. And so I have to ask him about our influence on him because I have an older brother as well. So I hope we had very different ideas about work and school. And but although we all took it very seriously, right, as you kind of had to when your parents, believe in education, as do I. I want to, I'm kind of obsessed with storytelling, something that I know you as part of your world. So when you were growing up, was there someone in particular that was a good storyteller, and kind of what made them a good storyteller?
There were a lot of people. I mean, my folks would had a lot of friends that came over often, and there was one friend, Joe was his first name, who he managed to just make everything funny. Like he could somehow tell a story. And it's funny that I don't remember the specific stories that he told, but I just remember that if Joe began telling a story about my dad or my mom when they were younger, I was going to be laughing. And I wish I could remember, like I wish I could go back and crystallize what it was that he was doing. But again, I was too young to kind of do more than just appreciate it. But yeah, he was somebody who I always loved listening to his stories, for sure.
It's interesting you talk about humor because I often reference that. I think successful comedians are amazing storytellers. They take you on that journey and we don't even realize, like, at least the ones I love, that's, those anecdotal things that you're waiting for the punchline and they think, and I love when you think you're going this way and then they switch it at the last minute.
Yeah, and it's so seamless. It's effortless. It's like it's in their bones. Yeah.
Chris, what was your first paying job?
Oh my God. Okay, so I invented a job for myself in 5th grade where Rubik's Cube was a big deal. And we got the little book that was like how to solve the Rubik's Cube, and I memorized how to do it. I wish I could say that I learned how to do it on my own, but no, I didn't. I memerized it.
I don't know that
And
anyone does.
yeah, but I would charge kids 10 cents in 5th grade to reset their Rubik's Cubes. That was like my first paying job, I think.
So you're a little entrepreneur.
I guess so. I guess so.
Have you seen Speed Cubers, the documentary?
No, but I've seen some people do the cube fast online, and it's amazing.
It's a great, I highly recommend it. It's pretty
Speed Cubers,
awesome.
okay.
Yeah, Speed Cubers. It's knowing that you have any kind of link to Rubik's Cube, you'll appreciate it. But there's actually a pretty compelling story about the two characters, the two people, kind of, you know, the champ and then the kind of champion rising, and their friendship, and it's quite and then just impressive in how they do it and the records they hold.
I hadn't heard of it, but I'll check it out. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious. So, you know, your father's an accountant, your mother's kind of sales, and I think of you as being a very creative person, despite the fact that your degree was in physics and astronomy. So I'm kind of curious how you ended up there and then went to go kind of to a master's degree at MIT pursuing computer graphics. Like how did the kind of creative side and the tech side end up converging?
For sure. So I had a really great physics teacher in high school. Tucker Hyatt was his name. And it was like the first subject that I had discovered in high school that I just really enjoyed doing. I mean, I could do the other things, but this one was, every class was exciting and great. And when I went off to college, if you would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I might have still said astronaut when I went off to college, because I basically, that was my answer for I have no idea. I don't know. And so I kind of just rode that momentum of physics into the physics program at college, and stuck with it. And it wasn't necessarily for love of physics as much as it was just carrying over the love of that I had learned about the subject from this incredible teacher. You know, at the same time, other things that were going on in my life were, you know, I was a child of the Star Wars era, and like visual effects and big blockbusters were a thing that I grew up around. And by the time, I can't remember exactly when it was, I was lucky enough to go on a tour of Industrial Light and Magic in 91. I think it might have been 91, January. And at the time, they were still mostly classic special effects, but they had this sort of small office that was doing JP, they called it. It was Jurassic Park. They were in the process of figuring out how to make computer-generated dinosaurs. And I walked into this space where there were a dozen people wearing shorts with toys on their desks and big computers, and they're watching dinosaurs running around on their screens and trying to figure out ways to make them look better. And I instantly in that moment, I was like, oh, I know exactly what I want to do. These people are using computers, which have been a huge part of my life too, to do amazing spectacle things that people had never seen before. And there's a lot of math in there, but there's also a lot of art and storytelling. And those were just all, I was a kind of, I don't want to say jack of all trades because it implies that I was good at all those things, but I was interested in all those things and didn't imagine that there'd be a convergence, right? Like, but there it was in this one visit. And I knew right away, like, oh, I need to make films on computers. That was like, ding, right? And it wasn't until I was 20, 21 years old when that happened. Yeah.
I love that aha moment, you know, JP, you know, having that. I remember seeing the movie and just being blown away by, you know, and again, as a child of Star Wars and special effects, and, you know, and again, I think the reason for me that I like those kinds of things is because I don't think about them. I don't question, oh my God, now there's, you know, light speed or whatever it may be, or creatures. It seamlessly worked into the story. And that's I think the beauty of when they're done well, is you don't notice the effects other than you're just mesmerized, and it enhances the story.
I agree. When it's not spectacle for the sake of spectacle, but it is realizing a thing that otherwise couldn't be seen but was necessary. That's when I think it's really hitting the sweet spot. And
then the shift. So I'm curious about Pixar, because they are the kind of gold standard for animation. I think will always be the gold standard. How did you end up there, and what was that experience like?
So when I went to grad school, as you mentioned, I went to the media lab at MIT, and I began studying fire synthesis. I wanted to create computer generated fire, and so that was my master's thesis project. And I went first from MIT to Rhythm Hues. This is a visual effects studio in Los Angeles at the time that was doing, you know them from Babe, from Golden Compass movies, from I mean, they were in business for many years. Life of Pi was, I think, the film they got their last Oscar for just before they declared bankruptcy. Anyway, I did 3 years in visual effects with Rhythm Hues, and I loved the creativity, but I didn't like the vendor-client relationship that exists in VFX. We had the directors we'd work with would come in once every 2 weeks to bash on the things that we had done, and then we'd have to go and fix them and everything. And I understood they're doing their jobs and we're doing ours, but I wanted to parlay my experience as a computer graphics person into an actual studio job where I would be in the trenches with the filmmakers and be part of the filmmaking team and not like the people you hired to do this task for you. Yeah, and so that's why I went to Pixar.
You just went to, yeah, you make it sound like it was.
Well, sorry, I applied. I started looking.
I'm like, Pixar, I'm ready for you.
I started looking for a place that I could do that. Pixar was in the process of, they had just released Toy Story and they were growing like mad. I had some friends up there and made the switch and worked on A Bug's Life was the first project that I worked on there. And it was like a 180-degree shift from the type of relationship that I had trouble with at R&H. It was like, you're working with the director and the director of photography and the art directors, like hand in hand as a group trying to make something great.
So because you come from the world of visual effects, which seems from a layman's person, you're adding effects to live action as opposed to animation where you're generating everything from kind of, the foundation and the scratch. Was that a conscious decision that animation as opposed to visual effects, and do you make a distinction between those kinds of things?
I do make a little distinction, but Rhythm Hues had a pretty big portfolio. So they were doing visual effects. They also were doing fully animated ride films. They were doing fully animated commercials. So Rhythm Hues' reel is a very diverse reel that includes VFX and full animation. And so I got to do both of those when I was there. And really it was, if you looked across the whole spectrum of who are the people making work under one roof to, with a goal of storytelling, it was the animation studios. And in 1997, when this was going on, it was really, Pixar was the one, it was Pixar and PDI. PDI released Ants a couple of weeks before A Bug's Life, and those were the two studios at the time successfully making animated feature films. So there was really only a couple places to go, but it's the same technology. It's, the same tools, same ideas. Yeah.
Because I want to ask you, what do you think is the most surprising place you found yourself, whether that's a specific location or engaging with a specific person that earlier you would have like, I can't believe I'm talking to, or I'm in this location?
I don't know. That's a very tough question. And I think that, my answers would not actually come from my professional experience so much. There are moments like I was driving across the country one year with a friend of mine, and we were pulling into Zion National Park. This is before cell phones. This is, I was a teenager. And there was like a 2-lane road in Zion National Park, and we were stuck in traffic. We were going very slow, and we were trying to figure out why. And it was because there were these bikers on the right side of the road, like a group of road bikers on a tour. And as we're inching our way past these bikers one at a time, I recognized that one of the bikers had one of those butt packs with 2 water bottles in it, one on each side. And I say to my friend, I'm like, oh my God, my dad has one of those. Because I'd never really seen those much before at the time. And as we pull up past this person, it's my father riding his bike in Utah. I had no idea he was going to be there. And it's like, so I rolled the window down and I was like, hey, Dad. And he almost crashed because he's like, wait, what are you doing here? Right. And so it's one of I've had moments like that throughout my life where just circumstance has brought people into the same place that you would just never expect that to happen. And honestly, those are the more like, I'm surprised that that type of thing happened. But yeah, I don't think I have a professional example of answers to that question that I can think of.
I'll come back to later, and I want you to think on that.
Yeah, okay, I'll puzzle on it.
So Pixar is known not just for its technical ability, but for really embracing the beauty, the power, the process of story. And I want to ask you, coming from physics and astronomy and computer, then shifting into visual effects, and then Pixar, where really story mattered. Do you think that being good at telling stories is a skill that can be developed, or do you think you kind of were born with it or not? I
certainly hope so. Like I think that my entire career path has been kind of predicated on the idea that yes, it is a learnable skill, a teachable skill. I think like all things, practice helps. And I think that again, yeah, I think I'm a better storyteller than I was 20 years ago. And it might just be from being 20 years older. It also might be from reading all these texts that I've read, digesting all the stories that I've digested. And I'm not sure where to point to, but I certainly feel like, like all things, like if you want to learn how to cook, you learn the tools, you learn the ideas, you study the way people do things whose work you admire, right? And that's the same thing that I've been applying to my own, school of storytelling. I've just been trying to study those things that impress me and try to figure out why they work and then emulate them. So far so good, but I hope to have many more years of continuing to learn it because I love the subject.
I think as an educator, I think to be an educator, you have to be in love with learning. At least the good educators, I should say. And for me, I'm taking a course right now and on a marketing tactic, and it's being able to like know something today you didn't know yesterday is a pretty cool experience. Maybe it doesn't happen that quickly, but over time you're like, I know some stuff now. And so I love that process, and I love the process of being able to share that as I teach my kids, whether it's board games or whatever, riding a bike or all those things. I think having knowledge and then being able to pass it on is pretty awesome. And I'm assuming you must have that in you because of your teaching profession.
That is a very satisfying thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of satisfying, I can imagine that the Academy Award experience was pretty awesome. And so can you tell us a little bit about like finding out you were nominated and then you got one and like all that? What was that like?
It was really an amazing experience. The thing that most people don't necessarily realize about the Sci-Tech Awards, so this was a Sci-Tech Award I received with 3 of my Rhythm and Hues colleagues in 2014. And it's not like the normal Academy method that we're familiar with, where something that was done in the last year receives some acknowledgement and gets nominated and then is up for the running for that award with some other competition. The Sci-Tech team, I don't know exactly how they work, but essentially every year they pick some subjects of areas where they think innovation has occurred that they would like to honor, and then they send off some researchers to go and try to figure out, who helped make this commonplace, right? How did this happen? And so, when I started at Rhythm and Hues at 24 years old, and I worked there from I was 24 to 27. One of the projects, the biggest project that I worked on there was rewriting their animation software, because it was very clear soon after I got there that their animation system was not built to grow with the studio. So it was like every new project that would come in required new software, and you had to break the software, you had to use it in a way it wasn't intended to be used. And R&H in 94 had these really lofty goals, and many of them they lived up to, right? Delivering, getting Oscars for visual effects. This was like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a young engineer who thought, okay, if it's going to last for a while, we need to do this. And if it's, we have to make assumptions that we're like, that we don't know what we need to know to make this work, right? We have to assume that someone's going to ask the studio to produce something like a dragon in a Game of Thrones show, which they did a lot of. And we won't know today how that's going to be done, but we need to make sure that the system is built so that it can do that. What decisions can we make? And, me and this huge team of people who were working on this thing over the years, all sort of were thinking that way with this forward thinking. And then 17 years later, we get a call from the Academy saying, your software program, Voodoo, it was called Voodoo, is up for a Sci-Tech Oscar. And you're like, what? And so it was one of these things where it was, first of all, it was an amazing opportunity to reconnect people I hadn't talked to in many years. Because I left Rhythm Hues in 97 and I've gone off and then went and started teaching. And so just that whole process allowed me to reconnect with some of these great people that I worked with. And then to have that acknowledgement that the thing you were trying to do of being forward thinking and try to create a system that would last actually worked, and it had a meaningful impact on the industry, that felt great. And so again, though, it was like a time capsule, because all the work I put in on this project was done by 97. Other people picked it up and continued working on it, and like dozens of engineers had their hands in that program to make it what it was. But then 17 years later, we get a call saying, hey, that thing you did was pretty awesome. And so there was this like really surprise acknowledgement of this thing we did a long time ago.
And do you still get an award? Do you actually get
No, you don't. You get a plaque. You get like a, yeah. It's not the actual Oscar. Yeah, but it's still
an Oscar.
Yeah. I was happy, and we did get to go to a little black tie event in LA and sit and enjoy the company of all the folks who were acknowledged that year. So it was great.
I mean, yeah, and it's a legacy thing too. I mean, it's, the fact that you're saying like something you guys were hard at work on has had that impact. I think, lots of people in their lives try and have impact and don't have a meaningful impact that's recognized necessarily.
Yeah,
So
this hasn't happened to me enough yet, but I think that, like you mentioned,
still young.
I know, right? You mentioned teachers, and I know that I have told this physics teacher of mine, Tucker Hyatt, how thankful I was for his mentorship as a high school student. This is like having some student you work with come back 17 years later and say, these things you said or did or whatever were really influential and helpful in my life. Like having these people come back and say, these things you did many, many years ago, still have repercussions in the industry. And it's nice, it's nice to know that often we put good energy into the world and don't know what happens to it. And sometimes that's just fine. But sometimes if you can hear back, it's a really cool thing to know that there was a good follow-up.
So by most measures, having that kind of achievement, people would, say pretty amazing success. How does Chris Perry define success?
Oh, I'm still trying to figure that out. I think, there's this kind of popular capitalistic model, which is like getting paid for doing work you love to do is like a measure of success. I almost want to go even like strip away the money from that. I think if your days are fulfilling and you're doing something that you're passionate about, I think I feel pretty good about those days. So I feel very successful if I have a run of those days, even months or weeks like that. That feels pretty great. And, I'm kind of a believer that passion will open doors, right? Like you put in the energy and people will start noticing. And so, yeah, it's but I'm still, and like I said, I'm still trying to figure that out for myself, right? We all make decisions every day about, okay, this choice I'm making today is going to send me on a slightly different path than I've been on up till today. Will
I think
it be
that's also kind
successful?
of,
Yeah.
the educators, the learners in us are like, the iterations, how you iterate to go along that path and making those decisions, and then seeing what happens and then making another decision and seeing
Tweak a little bit. Yeah, that didn't work so well, but I did like this part of it. Yeah.
I refer to that, people say, how you doing and things. I'm like, I'm a work in progress, both
Right.
personally and professionally. I'm a work in progress. I think that's a good place to be for most of your life.
I love that. I'm going to borrow that expression. Thank you.
Chris, what inspires you? So we talk about passion. What inspires you to pursue those little choices and decisions you make?
It's I'm inspired by a lot of different things. Anything that makes me look at the world in a slightly different way, like, that peels back a layer that I might not be aware of. I'm totally inspired by that. I feel like in the work in progress, kind of ongoing work in progress thing, like, I know I don't know everything I should know. And I know that I'm probably making silly, ignorant mistakes every day still, that if someone just like points out to me this thing, that it might make my life easier and the lives easier of those people around me. So I'm always inspired by learning and by peeling back those layers that are hiding the truth that are in front of us right now. I'm inspired by any creative thing that gives me an emotional reaction, like, honestly. And I watch a lot of shows, I watch a lot of animation, I read a lot. And one of the things I've come to recognize, and this happens teaching too, this is going to be a tangent for a second, sorry. I tell my students when I start teaching animation 1, most people who come to computer animation 1 class are fans of the medium, right? They've never done it themselves, but they're like, this is really cool and I'd like to learn more about it. So they show up as fans, and I warn them on day 1, I say, look, I'm going to ruin animation for you, because when you try to make it, you're going to start hating it. But good news, because you're going to know how it all works, and you'll start seeing through things that you used to be really charmed by, and you're going to see that they were, made a little sloppily, or like there's things about them you're going to start, you're going to see through the cracks, if you will. And I say, but the good news is, while I'm going to ruin 90% of it for you, there's still going to be 10% of animation that you see that's going to blow you away, and you're not going to know why you're crying or why you're having this emotional feeling. And it won't be till you watch it a second or a third time that you might see the crafts work underneath there. And so for me, going back to answering this question, again, if you play a short for me that moves me, because like, I know animation, I live it, I breathe it, I see it every day. If I can watch a piece of animation and not realize that I'm watching animation and just be floored, that inspires me, because it reminds me that, like, oh yes, this isn't just turning a crank. Like, there are the right combination of writing and color and light and performance and timing and music. All those things can still transcend themselves, right? In the same way that like milk and tomato paste and ground pork and ground beef can become a bolognese sauce, right? Like, one of those things on their own, like, somehow it's better than the sum of its parts. And so that inspires me when I can have an emotional response to something that somebody wrote or filmed or shot or created.
Yeah, having worked in the film industry and recognizing all those ingredients that go into making something successful, it's actually amazing sometimes that any of them are successful, because that too many cooks in the kitchen. But when it happens, it's magic. And and movies that I love, you go and you're just like, they just got it so right, and it makes it special. And I think the food is a great analogy, because you can have all the raw ingredients and then you put them together in the right amounts in the right way, and oh my god, it's a masterpiece. And I love
like
that.
You and I each have the same set of ingredients, we might make 2 very different things.
Well, it's funny. There was a long time ago that I thought it'd be really cool if I was a billionaire, I'd have 2 famous directors make the same movie from the same script. and and then have two different versions and perspectives. Because I love, you talked about earlier, like being able to see the world from a different perspective. And that's what I think, when I read a book that's turned into a movie, and many people criticize, oh, it wasn't as good as the book.
Right.
And it's because they fell in love with the story as a book, and they had, their imagination created, and then when it doesn't live up to, and I think there are times where it, surpasses the expectations, but again, that creative process of those ingredients coming together to make that magic, to make that emotional connection is really what I think good storytelling and is all about.
Here.
So Chris, we're works in progress, but if you could go back and give one piece of advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
Only one piece of advice?
One advice, we only have time for one.
One piece of advice, I would say, take better care of your body. Yeah.
As I stretch.
Exactly.
I feel
exactly. Stretch, good hydration, right? Like make exercise a nice regular thing. There's so many things that you learn as you start to weaken and get older that you're like, oh God, it was 30
Sadly,
years
I can
of
relate.
doing that. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, take care of yourself, 21-year-old self.
What do you think is, you were kind of working when you were at R&H on pretty innovative things that kind of changed the game. What do you think's next in terms of, animation, or in terms of what's going to be the next, thing that's going to happen or is happening?
Oh, that's great questions. One of the big things that's happening right now in my field is the arrival of real-time rendering courtesy of game engine technology. So in case your listeners don't know this stuff, the technology that creates Pixar movies, as from math, and the technology that creates Call of Duty or Overwatch or other games from math are the same. It's the same math. But when I was on Bugs Life, it would take an hour to generate a frame of that movie. And now you can download a game onto your PlayStation or to your PC, and you're going to get 60 of those frames a second. Okay, so something that took an hour, that took 60 minutes to make, now you can get 60 of them in a second. And it's because the game industry came of life and prioritized speed of rendering and high quality visuals. So they have written software and created hardware that is like all about how do we make high quality visuals as fast as we can? Because otherwise the play experience kind of stinks. Well, the filmmakers are starting to figure this out now. And so I'm just finishing a project, which I'll probably mention later, where we used the Unreal Engine, which is the engine that is what drives the game Fortnite and many others. But Epic Games has this engine called the Unreal Engine that is a real-time game engine. We just used it to make a short film. And it's not just that it renders faster, it also kind of changes your approach to the actual making of it. And so I think this is going to be revolutionary in the field of computer animation. How are Jane and Joe Q public going to notice it? I'm not sure, but I would say my hope is that there'll be a greater number of voices. Like right now, to make a big animated film in Pixar probably costs $150 million or more, right? But if you can make one for $1 million with 20 people in a garage in a year, that might democratize the industry a little bit more and bring a few more voices in. And what I'd love to see for that is then we'll start seeing different types of stories. Like not everything has to be a 4-quadrant family feature. It's okay to be tragic and sad and dramatic. Or, adult animation is kind of taking off right now. So you can be edgy and raunchy and what have you. So I'd love to see this technology help make animation the medium that it's supposed to be and not a genre like it kind of is. So that's one big up and coming thing. And the other big one we're all in the middle of, which is the streamers, and the fact that now that distribution is not in the hands of a few theater companies and it doesn't cost a huge amount of money to get something distributed. I could put my own work online for free and still build my audience. That I think is another thing that we're only just seeing the implications of that. Because again, animation requires such a high skill set and so many people working together. But how do these two things converge over the next 10 years? I'm going to be very excited to watch and participate in it.
The streaming thing, I think the music industry is a few steps ahead.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
there are people who are releasing albums, just releasing them on Spotify or or in iCloud, cloud, without the need of the record labels and things. And so, as you said, I think if the ease with which you can produce animation becomes down to both in cost and ease, then the distribution is already now in place, where you can build that audience online and without having to. And I love that again, I think A, it allows for the diversity of voices, and B, allows anyone access both to make and consume.
Yes, yeah, it's great. It's great.
So what's next for Chris Perry?
Well, okay, so we're going to take this short film that I was just finishing. We're finishing it up. We're going to be taking that to festivals and hopefully coming to a screen near you sometime soon.
Can you share the title, or
it's called Little Bird. Little Bird, and it's short. It's like a 3-minute animated short made in this game engine, and it's about a young astronaut. Oh, there's a lot of connection here. A young astronaut who is trying to rescue her dad. So I'll leave it there. So Little Bird. And you mentioned in my intro, I have a book coming out. So a colleague of mine, Eric Sanders, who you may or may not know, Eric and I have written a book that is it's part of the screenwriting literature, but it's specifically a book called Scene Writing. And we found in our years of teaching screenwriting that there are a lot of options out there for 3-act structure, long story arcs, how to beat out a script. Like there's a lot of structure-minded books out there, but we found that when students actually need to translate a beat outline into a script, there's not enough instruction to guide them on how do you actually do that. It's not easy. And we found that all of our time in our classes were spent helping talk through the sort of fundamentals of how do you get this scene out in a clear and coherent and, most importantly, engaging way. And so we decided we'd write a book about it. And so we have an entire book coming out, should be out in spring of 2022, from Bloomsbury Press, called Scene Writing. And it will help you or anybody who wants to translate their ideas into actual screenplay form do so focused on the building blocks of every great film and TV show, which is the scene. Yeah.
I've used you 20 years ago when I wrote a number of very mediocre scripts and read some of those big structure books and failed at the scene. So
yeah, it's an art, and
I'll be excited to see it and see how it can help me.
We're hoping it makes a dent and provides something to complement all those other structure books, because there are great ones out there.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really filling a need, which is awesome. We're now at the section where I call this my rapid fire, 9 rapid fire questions.
Ooh, okay, I've got to get ready.
Prepare yourself. First kind of thing that comes to your mind. So if a movie was made about your life, who would you want to play you?
I have no idea, but can I be written by Aaron Sorkin? That's what I want. Can I make that request? Okay. Yeah.
Sure, we allow that.
Good.
I'm pretty sure about the answer to here, but should stories always have happy endings?
No.
So Pixar didn't quite brainwash you completely.
There's room for stories with happy endings, but I think we learn more from failure, and so I think there should be out there too. Yeah.
Can you name your favorite emoji? Tomorrow's World Emoji Day, so what's your favorite emoji?
My favorite emoji. I'm so boring. I use the thumbs up all the time. So boring.
I think I do too. I actually created a purple one to go with my branding.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
What's your favorite? Can you name one of your favorite songs?
Current hot on my rotation right now is Harmony Hall by Vampire Weekend.
What's your favorite social media platform?
I don't spend a lot of time on them, but I would say that Instagram is the one that is easiest for me to get the most out of when I do spend time with it. Yeah.
Can you name a book that left a lasting impression on you?
Many, but I will name one. Seven Eves by Neil Stevenson.
Now, this is a very tough question for most, but probably more so for people like you and I. Can you name one of your favorite movies?
I'm glad you phrased it as one of my favorites. That's an easy one.
That's the only way to do it.
If you say favorite, then I can't do it. Little Miss Sunshine.
I always, my joke is that I have, when people say, can you name your top 10? I have 100 movies in my top 10 list.
That sounds about right.
What's one thing you can't live without?
Blender. I need a blender. Like at least one meal a day is blended.
And if you could be credited with inventing something other than voodoo, what would it be and why?
I would like to be credited for inventing a sustainable business model for higher education, because it is broken, and somebody is going to figure something out that will work, because we do need education, but the way we pay for it right now is dumb.
Thank you. That's the end of the formal portion. Last thing, you've been great, and you talked about both the book and the short. Is there anything else you want to share about projects you're working on, things you think people should know about, or anything of that nature?
No, I mean, I think that we're going to try to bring the short out to the world, and it's a kind of teaser, as you'll see when you can eventually see it, for a longer story involving the same characters in the same world, which is exciting. And I don't think there's anything else right now to share, but thank you.
And if people are interested in finding out more about Chris Perry or want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to be connected?
They could probably, first stop is maybe bitfilms.com. That's it's not a often maintained website, but it kind of has the broad strokes of some of the films that I've done, a little bit of information about me. That's probably a good starting place.
Chris, this has been super fun. It's interesting. I've known you a long time, and the fact that our paths sort of professionally converge in our love of animation, our love of movies, is pretty wonderful. And so thanks for sharing yourself so thoughtfully, and thank you for helping us connect the dots. Thank you for taking your time to listen to this podcast. Please subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss any future episodes. If you could also do me a favor and please leave a review on iTunes, I would really appreciate that. Remember, story matters and is the best way to connect the dots.